Welcome back to the Jurassic Park Jeep 73 video series. Jurassic Jack and I are about to set off on a brand new adventure on rebuilding this thing. And I think Jurassic Jack might be here today. We'll just wait and see about that. Or perhaps he's locked himself in the car. Okay, now's the time. Anyway, I don't know what he's going to do. Welcome to the program. That's a nice shirt you got there. So why are we building this Jurassic Park Jeep?
I do not know.
You don't know? Well, you must like Jurassic Park, right?
Yeah?
Yeah? What do you like about it?
The dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs? Okay, what's your favorite dinosaur?
The Velociraptor.
Velociraptor. Cool. And what was the name of this Jeep? Did you name it?
Blue.
Blue, but it's red.
I know, but you said that was funny.
It is funny. And why did we pick number 73?
Because he plays football and he's number 77. And my favorite number is 3.
Okay. And
that's why it's 73.
oh, you put them together. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we're about halfway through your little project here, and it's the middle of the coronavirus outbreak of 2020. Remember where you were, folks. So we're at home for a while, so probably get some of this project done, right? Yes. You still have school on Monday, but we'll see if that changes. So some little things we've been working on. There's so many parts that need to get cleaned up and painted, so we've been doing some of that. This is a fuel rail that I first painted with some aluminum aluminum paint, and then cooked it in the barbecue.
Yeah, he wants to eat these things.
Yeah, they're delicious, aren't they? They look great.
Yeah,
Yeah, just wait till you see this one. Oh yeah, look at this bad boy. So you saw a preview of
yeah, he
working
cooked
on
this too.
They cooked it up real nice. The paint was kind of coming off, so that's why I cooked it, but I think it's okay. And it also smells like the chicken we ate yesterday. Some other Raptors like chicken?
They like
Dodo meat. You heard it here. Okay. And then this goofy looking drying canister thing, which I'm still not sure why Jeep has this in it, but I thought I'd paint that red. So yeah, lots of different colors. So anyway, we're gonna start putting this thing back together. That's what this video is about. You're gonna participate a little bit, right? Yeah, because you're learning. You're learning about your Jeep. But one day you're gonna have. Okay. So that's what we're up to. Oh geez, that was a long introduction video, but can I get started?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have any words of wisdom or deranged behavior that you want to exhibit at this time? Okay. Moving on. Alright, so this is where we left off in the last video. Got the axles all cleaned and painted up. Just giving a recap. Notice the ball joints are installed on either end. And the rear one as well, all painted up with the black. It was actually trim clad, high temp enamel. So for whatever reason, I jumped into U-joints. So these are for the front axle U-joints. So the U-joints in the front axle are different than the ones for the drive shafts. It kind of screwed me up a bit. These ones have sort of a C-clip you got to get out. And it took me hours. I just put a small segment of the videos here to show you what I was dealing with. It is the thing you think you're looking at, and you just have to get a hold of it with something. And I ended up just getting a piece there with the screwdriver and then pulled it out with another screwdriver. Now at this point, I decided to use the vise to extract the U-joints, and all that it did is destroy my vise. Thankfully, it had a lifetime warranty at Canadian Tire, but don't do it this way. See, on the back side, I actually have an old kind of bearing with a hole in the center. You basically just need to find something with a larger hole than the end of the U-joint in order to push it out the cap. And here's where I spent much of my winter standing in front of that wire wheel and ultimately painting again with the trim-clad black just to inhibit a little bit of rust. Jurassic Jack trying to help me out a little bit here, not having a lot of luck with the needle nose. So these drive shaft versions, you remove the clip from the outside, as you can see. And then here's how I was hammering them out. This is what I was describing earlier. And then pull the caps off, and you can slide them out. So be mindful and measure before you order these, because they'll say they work for YJ's Quadratec and they don't. And so you end up having to buy them again. I think the ones I got were SKF, and I ended up picking them up locally here. And there it comes out, and then back to the wire wheel again. So I ended up wire wheeling both drive shafts completely, and they turned out pretty well. And then tape all the parts I don't want paint on. That's the steering linkage as well. And then, of course, the long one's actually the front drive shaft on the Jeep, which is kind of funny. The short one is for the rear. And then reinstalling the drive shaft U-joints as well with the external clips. These actually, I felt they were easier to do than the front ones. I will reference a really nice video on these here that I found if this isn't enough for you. And tape them up so the caps don't fall off, and then you get needle bearings everywhere, which did happen to me. And yeah, this is again for the front steering or front axle. Same kind of process, except you got to put the clips in from the end, which is what I'm doing there. That little bearing got really helpful. I used that quite extensively. So by the end of this, I was getting really good at U-joints, and you will be too. And yeah, Jeep Solid does a really nice video series on U-joints that I'd recommend. Don't buy cheap ones, by the way, because these aren't something you want to change later. All right, and again, more cleaning and painting. So this is the brake booster. First dumping out all of the fluid from the reservoir. This is kind of a little sealing cap, which I'm going to clean off. It's just a rubber sort of grommet thing that seals it, keeps the water out. You don't ever want moisture or any airflow in there, because it will just get water in your fluid and then it'll stop working. I couldn't get these little pigtail linkages out. I might end up trying that again later. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, but the new one did come in the kit that I ordered from Quadratec, which you'll see in a minute. And so now I'm just kind of taking it all apart so I can wire wheel it again and ultimately paint it. So that's what it looks like once it's been cleaned up. As you can see, I'm kind of jumping through this because it gets pretty boring watching me stand in front of a wire wheel. Again with the bolts too. So I'm cleaning everything. I'm polishing everything and painting everything. All right. So now we're moving on to the rear axle again and installing the springs, the leaf springs. And really not that complicated. You insert the bracket and put on the lock nuts. I did buy completely new leaf springs. So these are also from Quadratec. They looked pretty good. The hardware wasn't great. These nuts, in a lot of cases, you'll notice that the nylon insert for the lock nut just comes right off. And, you know, that's just, you get this kind of Chinese quality, right? And you kind of get what you pay for. And here it is on the front axle, same kind of deal. Putting them on. And I can't remember which one of these where the nylon kind of comes out. I'm not sure if I have video of that one, but most of the rest worked okay. And ultimately, when these are done, you have to torque them down. Throughout this video, I'm not going to reference the torque numbers. If you really want to know, I can send you a link to the manuals for 93 to 95 YJs, which will solve all these questions for you, just so I don't have to look them up again. You know, there's the rust coming out of my socket here, which is kind of hilarious. All right, so Corey came over, and we're going to put the frame back on, the nice new powder-coated frame. So I set up some jack stands at the front that I could just set this sort of cross member on, as you can see here. And then Corey held up the back while we lined up the rear axle, which is just on a 2x10, and got it in place. Now we're attaching the shackles. Now, I'll talk a bit about these shackles. Again, this part of the kit, and the bolts were fine, but the nuts are what's called pin nuts. So basically they take a normal nut, and then they drop a really large punch on it, and it basically distorts it so it almost becomes triangular. And about 80% of my nuts were unusable. Even with the air gun, they would not go on. So I ended up having to reuse a lot of the factory bolts. So I had to spend a lot of time cleaning them up, painting them, and putting them back in. And that was just a nightmare. So I'm going to give a review to that effect on the Quadratec website with reference to these leaf springs, because that was just unacceptable. You know, send out nuts that are just squished. Like, you know, you can't do that. But we did manage to get these in, and we did find enough nuts and bolts that we could use that I felt confident in. And of course, once you get them installed, you have to torque them on again too. Front axle, basically the same thing. You know, if you haven't seen my video on installing the bushings on a leaf spring, I'll reference that here. Back to the rear axle. putting in the outer axle seals, which took me a couple tries to buy the right ones here. These ones actually have a little flange on the outside, which is nice because they sit in. And otherwise, the old ones, they didn't actually have that. And didn't like that. Easy peasy. I didn't end up changing the bearings. I might regret that one day, but they felt pretty good, and I didn't have any at the time. So, and then the outer brake shield as well. Now at this point, I'm just going to put in a little segment on this. I'm treating the inside of the frame with a cavity protectant. So this is called a cavity wax. It's by Noxidol 700. And I'll reference the video here that I did on an overview of this product. But basically, you're trying to make sure the inside of the frame isn't going to rust. We've powder coated the outside, but this stuff, and it's kind of a snotty, gooey substance you'll see in a second. There it is there. And there's also the Noxidol 700, which is actually kind of a black, almost like a rubberized coating, which doesn't flow as much. So this is meant for the inside cavities. So it kind of will settle into place. And so that's why I use it on the inside, because it'll creep a little bit more. Now removing the pinion seal on the rear differential, Jurassic Jack helping there, not seemingly to wear any clothes. And this one was kind of a brute to get out, but I did eventually get it. And come on, John, get it out of there. And it's got to be close now. It's got to be close. There it goes. And again, clean it up and put the new one into place. There we go. And attaching the yoke again, and then reinstalling the nut, and ultimately torquing it down, which it didn't show on the front. So I ended up lining the bolt up with the yoke, just so I know that they were kind of going on, the nut, or the shaft, if you will, going on in the same direction. These things are balanced. Unfortunately, since I've cleaned up my drive shafts, any markings that were on them are since gone. So I got a 50-50 shot at getting those in right. Got the yoke off here. And now getting this seal out. It actually took me quite a while, but just reef on it. Like, just get your seal puller and reef, and it just jumps out. Took me a while trying to do it gently, and it wasn't necessary. And then lining it up again with the marks and putting the nut back on. And this was a clever idea. I think I saw this from Jeep Solid Garage, is using a large monkey wrench to get it back in. And now what I'm doing is I'm installing all of these clips. So you can actually buy these. They're not available anymore, so you're going to have to make yours count. So I actually painted mine. They were kind of white and stuff. And then I used an epoxy to glue them into place. Kind of worked. In some cases, you can also kind of screw them into place. This is a front cross member, which only purpose in life appears to be running the brake line from the left front to the right front. That also got powder coated as well, so it looks pretty sharp. And this is part of my brake line kit that I also got from Quadratec. And the kit doesn't include the ends, so the little bits, the rubber bits that go down to the brake caliper itself. It just includes the ones that kind of run around the chassis. They looked fine, and they were shaped pretty close to perfect. So I really don't have any complaints there. I got Jack helping me a little bit here to get these into place so that I can then fasten down. There's just a single screw that kind of holds these in the corners. Goes right into the frame. And now I'm running the rear brake lines. And so these are the clips that I was talking about where I epoxied them in. And take a lot of pictures when you pull these out because they only go in one way. There's 4 different lines that run down here. And they all kind of twist in amongst themselves. So if you get this wrong, you're going to be upset. And then it attaches to this rubber line at the back that goes down to the axle and ultimately out to the calipers, which I'm tightening down here. So again, that rubber cable is from the Jeep before. This didn't come as part of the kit. The kit only has the metal lines. And they seem to have some sort of a coating on them. I'm not sure what it is, but rust proofing. I think it's just steel with the rust proofing. Now these are the actual fuel lines. So I'm cleaning them up on the wire wheel, and they came out looking like new. I was actually going to rebuy these, but I found nobody sold them. And obviously it's clear why, is you don't need to. They're stainless steel. They'll last forever. So they look like new once you clean them up. There's no paint or anything on them. And now I'm installing the fuel filter. This whole area of the Jeep was just rusted to crap before, including the old filter. So with the powder coat, it's kind of rough in there, but it's definitely, as you can see, quite a bit cleaner than it was. I lost this bracket that kind of holds it down, so I just fabricated a new one out of some thin, cheap metal and hold it down. There's kind of a rubber insert there somehow I didn't lose that. And so this is what I mean. See how they start all kind of tangling in on themselves. It starts to get challenging to get them in the right place. Now I'm installing the brake cylinders. This is the right rear. So again, hooking that line up and then running it over the axle. There's a little hold down here. And this would be on the passenger side. And then you see it loops up over the differential. And now putting on the driver's side, hooking it up to the cylinder and securing that down. Now from the inside, there's a T-junction here, and it's kind of funky because each side goes into the junction, and then the junction goes to the front. But then it's tied into the vent line from the axle itself. So that little box actually is a vent line that attaches to a vent that's currently hanging off the back of my body. And now we're doing the parking cable. And so there's a left one and a right one, and then there's sort of an equalizer piece that I also bought new. The old one probably would have been okay. And then there's the front segment that I'm installing there. And then there's the little equalizer piece, and it's just adjustable with nuts. And it's pretty simple. It's not a lot of fun installing these right now just because there's no pedal at the front, and so they can be kind of tight. And so I'm now installing those into what I call the brake shields. So this is actually a vent line. So the metal is from the old one, but my vent line was completely rusted. And so I decided to make a new one out of air. This is actually air hose for airbags in the back of a truck. So it's a high pressure air hose. And so I heated it up and then glued it on with ABS cement. And this stuff, it's about a 1/4 inch cable. It's nice. It's black. It'll last forever. Way simpler than trying to get a metal one and bend it. So now here's the Noxidol 700 that I was talking about, and I'm just painting it on, which is unconventional. Usually you're supposed to spray it. But I found it painted really nicely, and once it gets up to about 20 degrees for 24 hours, which it wasn't at the time of this video, by the way, it turns into a really nice rubberized coating. And again, it's supposed to protect it. So since the old one was rusted completely to crap here, I decided that I didn't want the new one to do that, so I coated it on the top side. And my friend Ryan here helping me get the fuel tank back in. So you strap the fuel tank to the skid. And I have those funky red strips, which I didn't realize at the time you'll never see, and bolted into place. And now I'm attaching the filler hose as well. I was able to reuse all of the worm gears as well. They're all stainless steel. I just had to clean them up. Now installing the fuel pump. You're going to see in a bit, but it doesn't really, you don't think it fits. It kind of bangs into the bottom, and it took me a while, and I eventually found a video with someone saying this is normal. So you kind of, when you install it, it actually sucks the plastic up a little bit to fit. There's that vent line I was talking about getting run into place. And now I'm hooking up the fuel lines and the worm gear clamps as well. And those are, again, the existing lines that I literally just ran a rag over them and they were fine. And now there's the vent line. I'm hooking it up. I did also use the ABS cement on these, although I don't believe it's in the video. And there's a little holder here. It's kind of a rubber holder that I taped into place, which is literally what Jeep did. So now here's what I'm talking about. Like, it doesn't want to sit properly, and you think there's something wrong. It's not in there correctly, but you actually just have to get them in. And since they're such short screws, they kind of don't want to grab. But once they do grab, the whole top of the tank kind of lifts up, and so it's almost like a wedge in there. But eventually I did get it into place and got them all torqued down appropriately, as well as the worm gears all installed, as you can see. Last but not least, installing the vents. So there's one on either side of the tank, which ventilates all the way up, of course, to the front of the vehicle. That's the left one, and this is the right one here. Just installing with a screwdriver, kind of mashing them in. There we go. And here's the final product. Unfortunately, I got a smudge on my lens, and it'll last for a little bit here, but you can kind of see these lines. They kind of have a brass looking, I don't know if it is brass, kind of almost a spring around them. And then those are those really nice fuel lines with the brake line and then the black vent line on the top. And you see also on the bottom there's the parking cable coming through. So the clips seem to be staying in place. These ones are pretty strong. This one I actually screwed in from the bottom, the one that's in the blurry mess right here. And that really held it in place because it's pretty critical. Fuel filter up over the rear shock towers here. and then back to the fuel tank. And you notice the body mount holes in the cross member there, so you got to make sure you dodge those. Not looking too bad, hey? And then of course the rear brake lines, rear parking brake, looped up over the diff and over to the other side. So that's it. All the lines are now run. Just a quick hit on the rear axle shafts. I'm going to do a little excerpt on that here, but I did clean them up and I did paint them a little bit before installing them. And then I got to put that rear diff back together. So we're going to cut away and I'm going to show you how I did that with a little bit of graphic here.
All right, to give you an example of how I put this thing back together, I'll just do this here in a paint program because I ended up getting really blurry video as you were seeing. So first things first is you have to put in both the left and the right gears, and I have no idea what these are called, so just bear with me. Each of these then has a C-clip, which you can't quite see, which kind of goes inside of here. So you push the axle in, you slide the C-clip over top. This center part, this pin is actually not here at this point. So you can slide them in, they don't hit that. You drop the C-clip in and you push them back. Now behind each of these is a set of what I would call washers. Some of them have little sort of pieces that stick out, sort of, so they're centered. Again, don't know the terms of these. And so when you get this one and this one in there, and you pull back against the C-clip, the axle will hold them in place. So that's the first part. Get those two in there properly. Now, once you have the left one and the right one in, you have to put in the top one and the bottom. And this is the part that took me a long time to figure out. So first of all, you put them in on the front. So they basically sit like this, and they're in the teeth on either side. Once it's in there, and by the way, you don't put this washer, you can see there's a washer here, you don't put this in at this time. So just note that for later. And so you put the gear in here, and then you grab the axle with your hand on the outside, on the wheel hub, and you twist it back. So this gear, in essence, goes up to this location here. So now it's on the top. Now what you do is you keep twisting it until this gear actually moves kind of somewhere around there in the back, such that you can fit the new bottom gear in here, because they have to be exactly 180 degrees opposite. And so once you get them in there like that, now they're 180 degrees opposite. So now what you can do is turn it back so that they're basically sitting like this, situated like this, and you can push this washer in here, and you can push this washer in here. And once you have the two washers put into place, then you can turn the whole apparatus towards you, and then you can shove in this center pin like this and fasten it with the bolt. So that's how you put it all back together. The one thing you have to be careful of is these always want to slide in, drop their C-clip and slide back out. So you kind of got to be mindful that those things, when you're spinning the axle, aren't going to fall out, because that happened to me probably half a dozen times. So that is how I rebuilt's a strong word. That's how I put the gears back in my differential after they had fallen out. If the spacers behind here, the different washers, happen to have fallen out, God help you. I couldn't tell you what order they go back in. So best of luck to you.
So thank other version of John for that, using a crappy microphone. Doing the front steering knuckles now. Again, there's a ball joint on the top and a ball joint on the bottom. I couldn't fit my wrench under here for some reason. I can't remember why, but didn't put the torque wrench on there, but certainly couldn't fit it into the middle one on the top. So I did them with hand tools. And then there's that front axle that we were playing with before. So there's an inside axle that goes from the diff to that little union box, the little four-wheel drive union box. That's already in there. I must have missed that on the video. And now you put on the brake shield and then insert the wheel bearing. Now, I don't know this at this point, but I put the brake shield on inside out. So see how the shield is pushing out? It actually has to push in, if you will. And otherwise, when you put on sort of the hat-shaped rotor, they're not going to fit. So I ended up taking these apart and putting them together about 3 or 4 times before I got everything in the right position. And now I'm putting on the axle nut. So just know that I ended up taking this apart a few times, which is not great for these axle nuts. They're kind of meant to be one use, but you know, when you're an idiot like me, you do what you can. These get torqued down to an insane number. It's, you know, I'm going to say 156 foot-pounds or something like that. And again, I'm going to have to take these out anyway. Actually, I think I was able to remove them without actually pulling that off. But yeah, that's right, I was, because I just pulled the axles in and out. Did some greasing there. So these little grease nipples, I didn't realize this at first, but see the bottom one, it's kind of a 90-degree little grease nipple. And so you put the grease in, and then you actually have to take that nipple off and replace it with a little plug, because otherwise your U-joint, I guess the universal joint will hit it, and that doesn't work. So it took me a while to figure that out as I was breaking them off and wrecking the threads. See there, I'm putting in the little plug, and that one, because I kind of mangled it, I had to put in with permanent Loctite, so you know they're never getting greased again. So there, it's in place. And then again, I'm sliding it in. So you notice I have the brake shield on inverted this time. So I've now learned my lesson. And then attaching the hubs as well. I went with a new Timken hub. I've used them in a number of applications and never had one go on me yet. So I've decided they're decent. Getting the brake pads in there, it looks easy the way I've done it, but it took a while to figure out exactly which one went where. I didn't end up using the spacers on the end just because I powder coated the steering knuckles, so there kind of wasn't room. But everything did eventually fit in what seemed to be okay. The Iron Man color scheme was completely by accident, but I'm pretty enchanted with it. It's almost sand beige, you might say there. Yeah, looks all right. And then we're going to attach the line. So I ended up using the old bolt and the old washers as well. Can't remember what the name of that bolt is, but they're really, really hard. I've learned that through other experiments in the past. So they'll last forever. And then putting in the brake pins here on the other side. I ended up having to kind of rethread the hole because it had been powder coated. And here I go here. I'm just kind of threading the hole, and then it was able to go in. So these you don't put very tight. I don't remember what the setting was, but you can look that up. And then the brake line as well. So there you go. Front brakes completely installed. And this is that union. I ended up replacing this gasket later. I ordered one off Amazon, but it's not here. All of this is a little fork that moves a gear in and out whether or not you're in four-wheel drive. And I believe it's vacuum controlled too, just like everything in 1992 on a Jeep. Cleaning up the front diff because I did buy a really nice new seals for these, reusable seals. And you can see it there. They actually have some metal in them, so they last a lifetime, but you need a clean surface for that. And I'm tired of using RTVs, so we'll see how these work. And of course, when you're fastening these down, there is a pattern to it, so don't just torque them one at a time. Do them in the right sequence. There you go. See, look at that. The culvered starburst pattern. And there you go. The 10 bolts are in. So I ended up tackling these discs myself. Bernie wasn't available. And I'm not going to say anything that you're seeing right now is correct. But I'm going to reference a video that is correct. I ended up doing these again about 4 times to get them just right, because every piece has to go in just the right order and just the right way. The nice thing is, since it was clean, it was actually pretty easy to do, because you know everything had a nice color and you could see things, and there's no brake dust and everything. So I was able to get them in even with the axle currently installed, but it would take a while to do it otherwise. So you know, plan your day around it. You'll notice I held them together with some zip ties. I would actually just recommend you get a big clamp and hold them together from either side. That works fine. And then sliding on the drum. So now I'm going to install the wheels. So I have a lift, so this is handy. I basically just put these 2x4s in the way, and as I lowered the vehicle, it would lift the chassis up, as you can see here. Seemed pretty safe at the time. They're supported. And then installing the wheels. So I'm putting the old wheels on for now just because there's still a lot of work left to be done before I put on the new ones, and I don't want to bang them up. So pretty easy, and just install them with the impact. Not too tight. There we go. Same thing on the back. You can't see the boards, but I'm doing exactly the same thing. The 2x4s are just lifting the rear chassis, and then I'm sliding on the rear wheels. And impact to tighten them down. Easy peasy. And now the Jeep is back on its wheels. All right, so next we're doing, this is called the tie rod assembly. So step one is making sure they're about the same length. So from pin to pin, they're the same length. The adjustment is this wonky setup here. Mine seemed to be bent funny, so I actually had to kind of go and repair it on the vise just to kind of get it straightened out. But I tried to line them up so they were about the same length. In the end, you know, it was close, but that's what an alignment's for, right? If you make them exactly the same and as the old ones and your Jeep was aligned when you brought it in, they should be aligned when they're going out. It'll also help you align your steering later. So there I got it in place, and kind of goes in from the bottom, and then you install your crown nuts on the top of each side. Because of the powder coating, sometimes these things would get tight, and it would take a little while to get them in. As you can see, I had to adjust this one. I'm just kind of eyeballing the front wheel with the back wheel to see if they look like they're going in the same direction. And then, yeah, you tighten these down. Now I'm installing the steering dampener. This is a Rancho part. So it seemed like it was going well. They kind of got a funky bolt thing that they use, such that this could be a steering damper for a number of different vehicles. But this bolt, you don't see it here, but I end up stripping it. You put it on 55 foot-pounds, and the bolt completely stripped. They had to send me some new ones in the mail, so not thrilled with Rancho, to be honest with you. Their hardware kind of sucks. And in order to fit in the track bar, I ended up having to compress the suspension, so I just used a ratchet strap for that, and then was able to get it in. Make sure you put the bolt in from the back, because the steering box will be in the way later. And now I'm installing the brand new transmission crossmember. I'm later going to coat this with the Noxidol again, but for now I haven't. But that's it. Alright, so that was a long video. Basically got the frame all back together as you just saw. Got the wheels back on and the brakes. Dabbled in the suspension and the steering, but not completely finished just yet. Because we're preparing for tomorrow. Uncle Bernie's going to come in and we're going to work on getting the engine back together and installing the vehicle along with the transmission, which you also saw that we cleaned up and painted in this last video here. So it's not a natural break point here, but I know this video is getting really, really long. So it's time to move on to the next step. And it's starting to get nice outside too. So we want to get driving this thing. Isn't that right, Jurassic Jack? Yeah? Do you have anything to say for the viewers?
Those are wild dinosaurs.
No, not again.